welcome to yet another Grey's Anatomy video. This time we're going to talk about April Kepner. And this might be my last video on Grey's Anatomy. Not really because I'm tired of talking about Grey's Anatomy. It's more of, I don't know what else to talk about. I feel like when this subject, when April Kepner, I'm done with everything that I wanted to talk about from Grey's Anatomy. The reason why I wanted to make a video on April Kepner is because her evolution on the show, I think it's one of the best out of any of the characters. She began has been very annoying. No one liked her. The characters did not like her. The audience did not like her. No one liked her. No one. She was annoying. And then towards the later seasons, when she's like leaving the show, everybody's like, no, April, you can't leave. People loved her at the end, but people hated her in the beginning. So join me in this journey on talking about the evolution of April Kepner. We're first introduced to April in season 6 when Sarah Grace merged with Mercy was, where she was a resident at. First impression on April Kepner is that she was the new George. Why? Because she's the new underdog, the new person that people look over to, the people that the person that they underestimate. And that's who George was. He was the butt of the joke, and now April is the film version, the new version of George. George resurrected, I don't know. She's presented as a very insecure girl who carries a notebook at all times where she writes down affirmation notes to make herself feel better and be more confident, kind of reminding herself that she is a good surgeon and she deserves to be where she is. It made me feel very sad for her when Lexi, I think it was, who found her note and made fun of her for it. I mean, to be fair, it was a patient who kind of made Lexi do that, but still, she made April feel very vulnerable, and I felt very, very sorry for her. April is quickly fired due to getting distracted while examining her patient, resulting in forgetting to check her patient's airway. Her patient couldn't breathe and unfortunately passed away while the residents tried to save her. Richard questioned all the doctors who were there and fired April on the spot since she was the one behind the death. Now, I'm not 100% on Richard's side on firing April, especially since when Izzy cut the evac wire. I don't want to bring that up again, but she did do that purposely. She knew what she was doing and her intentions, and she did it anyway, and she only got suspension. And then April, she made a mistake, which, you know, I know that as a doctor you make a mistake and that ends someone's life, but she made a mistake, an honest mistake, and she gets fired for it. Like, I know that at the time, like, you know, everything was very tight because they were making cuts and they were firing people. So I guess it was just bad time for April, but still, like, it was not fair. And here comes April's savior, Derek. One of the first things that he did when he was chief is hire April back because he believed that she deserved a second chance, which obviously I agree with. And she sort of becomes the chief resident, also parallel to George being Richard's resident, the chief's resident when Richard was chief. And she sort of started developing a small crush on Derek, which I don't think it was romantic wise. Like, I think she developed that little crush was because Derek was the one who saw her. Like, everyone, like I mentioned in the beginning, everyone overlooked her. And everyone made fun of her and just underestimate her, while Derek didn't. Derek gave her a second chance. So I think it's like, oh my God, someone finally saw her, and that's why she developed a crush. Now let's get more into her relationship with God and with Matthew and Jackson. We're gonna call this segment Team Matthew or Team Jackson. So April is a Christian, and she kept her relationship with God a secret because she didn't want anyone to think less of her as a surgeon, for believing in God. When they find out that she's a virgin at the age of 28, they mocked her for that reason and also for waiting for marriage. Everyone should have S word for the first time when they're ready and not because they feel pressure to. And if your plan is to wait for marriage, it's okay. No one should be mocking you or making fun of you because of your decisions. Which, spoiler alert, she did not wait for marriage. She slept with Jackson the night before her boards. Here's the thing, she is, how to say it, kind of mad at Jackson for losing her virginity, which is not fair to do. He knows how important it is for her to, wait to marriage and God, and he knows how important that is for her. And when they were about to do what they were about to do, he asked her if she was she was sure. He wanted to know if that's truly what she wanted to do, and she said yes. And so it's not fair that she is putting all this blame on him, but I guess at the same time she is just projecting that. She blames herself for not waiting and feeling like she broke her rule with God. So I guess that she's just mad at her, but she projects as being mad at Jackson. She meets Matthew, who is, God, I forgot what he is. I think he's sort of like a first responder or something like that. Starts a relationship with him, and they both share the same relationship with God, which is what it made them closer. And shortly after they started seeing each other, he proposed to her in the most fucking annoying, terrible, cheesy, musical way. He puts on a freaking musical number just to propose. And obviously she said yes. She seems to still have feelings for Jackson, and it sort of seemed reciprocated, but the two of them are in relationships. Jackson is seeing Stephanie and she is seeing Matthew. Well, she's engaged to Matthew. She's about to marry him, and they still have feelings for each other. At April and Matthew's wedding, Jackson, with Stephanie right next to him as his day, he tells April that he still loves her. And they run away together, leaving Matthew at the altar. Like Jackson, you had your time to tell her that you love her. You're gonna do that in the middle of her fucking wedding when she's about to say the I do. Like, couldn't you just find a worse time possible to say that you love her? Like, Jackson and April realize that they have very different ideas on how to raise their kids, and she feels like Jackson doesn't really respect her religious traditions, and they get into a fight. And it turns out that she's pregnant. During the first few weeks, they act kind of awkward because of the fight, and they resolved it when Jackson decided that he'd go to church with April and their baby because he knows that is important for April. So, compromise, great. During a routine checkup, they found out that there's something wrong with the baby. The baby has osteogenesis imperfecta. April is struggling to understand why God will do this to her. She feels like God is punishing her for something. Their baby was diagnosed with type 2, meaning that he will die within minutes or hours after birth. His bones were breaking inside the womb, and Jackson wants to terminate the pregnancy because just to put an end to the suffering. But April refuses, which I don't blame April. I'm not gonna say what I will do, but I don't blame her for hoping for a miracle. At the end of the day, it's your baby, and that's not an easy choice to do, regardless of what they had chosen, whether to, terminate the pregnancy or what they end up doing, which was deliver the baby. Whatever choice, I think it's still very heartbreaking, and I wish that no one had to go through that. But they work out a plan with Catherine, inducing labor and baptizing the baby before the baby passes away. The labor was induced, and they named their son Samuel, and they cherished him in their arms. A priest came to baptize the baby, and Samuel squeezed April's finger, letting go shortly after. Not long after, Samuel passed away. April is very sad and angry about God and Samuel. She decides to go work with Dr. Hunt in the military. Initially, it was supposed to be only 3 months, but she kept postponing it, making Jackson upset. When she returned, she seemed more confident in herself, but also very distant. She's later offered another opportunity to go to Jordan as a field surgeon, and Jackson felt that she was abandoning him when he needed her the most, and gave her an ultimatum that he wasn't sure if he'd still be there when she comes back. When she comes back, they talk about her leaving him when he needed her to survive. They try couples therapy, but they recognize their marriage is beyond repair, and they get a divorce. A very heartbreaking event can either make a relationship get stronger or get weaker, and that's what happened in their case. The thing is that Jackson needed April in order for him to move on. He needed to be with her, to grieve together, and to mourn their baby together. However, April, she was dealing with many things at the time. I wouldn't call her that she was selfish. I feel like she just didn't really know how to deal with her pain, and she in some way forgot that she's not only the one suffering, Jackson is suffering too. She sort of forgot about Jackson's suffering, and she was very focused on God and trying to find a reason why he would do that to her. And that's why she, instead of reaching out to Jackson, she instead got distance from him. And on the day of the divorce, she realizes that she's pregnant again, and here's what April doesn't exactly make the right decisions. After the loss of Samu, she's avoiding getting any type of tests or even getting an ultrasound, which is irresponsible. But I can understand why she's doing it. She is scared of receiving bad news. She is scared of receiving the same type of news that she received with Samu. She doesn't want that with these babies. So she's being irresponsible. Yes, she should be getting her tests done. She should be getting her routine checkups. But I can understand why she's avoiding it. Where I don't agree with is the fact that she didn't tell Jackson. She hides her pregnancy from Jackson, and here's where I disagree completely. Since she found out in the middle of their divorce, she didn't want to tell him and make him double think the decision or to stay married to her just because of the baby, when he doesn't really want to stay married. And that's not a reason, but that's not a reason enough to not tell him that he's going to be a dad again, to make that decision of being as involved as he wants. Like, she needs to tell him that he's gonna be a dad. When he finds out, he's upset at her for not telling him. She eavesdrops on Catherine talking to him about the baby and getting legal actions against April, and she gets a restraining order to protect herself and the baby. Well, this whole thing becomes real messy when all could have been avoided if she had just communicated to him, but that's their main problem, communication issues. These two don't communicate. Because let's go back to the beginning of their relationship. April felt like Jackson didn't really respect her religious traditions. When you're dating someone outside of your religion, when you are an atheist and you're dating a Christian, like it is in this case, sort of, there's need to be a lot of communication and compromises. There needs to be a level of respect for that person's religions. And the thing is, April didn't feel like he was respecting that. And instead of just not talking about religion when he's around, or instead of just trying to hide that part of herself because she feels like he's mocking her, she should have just bring that subject. She should have just talked to him about this, like, especially when religion is so important in your life. April should have just talked about it with Jackson, like, hey, I feel like you don't respect my religion, and that hurts me. And now, hiding the fact that he's going to be a dad, I understand that she doesn't want him to still be married to her when he doesn't really want to, but say that to him. Hey, I'm pregnant. I know you don't want to be married to me anymore, so let's continue with the divorce. And I want you to be as involved with the baby as you want to do. You want to co-parent, great. You don't want to be involved, great. But she needs to talk to Jackson about it. He can't just assume what he's going to say. And I'm not saying that she's the only one who has communication issues, because Jackson does as well. I'm not saying that Jackson is perfect, that Jackson is a great communicator, because he's not. But in this case, I feel like the balance is more on April. Like, eventually they decide to just co-parent, and Jackson wanting to be in the room of the birth. She gives birth in Meredith's living room, where Ben has to perform a C-section. April develops a crisis in her faith after losing some of her patients in a very short amount of time, such as Paul Statler, who was injured from a hit and run, who died from a concussion, but especially Karen Taylor, who happens to be Matthew's wife. Karen is experiencing pain, and Arizona ended up operating on her. Feeling guilty, April went to the chapel, and Matthew, who was there, ignored her and left. When she comes back to the ICU, she's shocked to see that Karen didn't make it. Having lost God in the face of all the unfairness and cruelty, she goes to the bar and ends up sleeping with an intern. She continues sleeping with him and arriving to the hospital hangover from the night before. Jackson raises his concern for her, but she ignores him. She joins Owen on a trauma certification day for the interns, and she worsens the fictional situation, claiming that there were no rules in the harsh, uncaring world, and she even used a host to appear Rain to imitate her own trauma certification day. She breaks down, saying God doesn't just stop handing out trauma, and starts CPR on a dummy. She's a mess. In this whole thing, she's a mess. She has lost her faith, her relationship with God is not the same, and she is suffering a lot. After treating a patient where she opens up on not wanting to follow God's rules, he helps her restore her faith, and she spends the next day apologizing to the people she mistreated badly. She opens up to Jackson that she felt like he had won when she lost God, which made her hate him, and she realizes Jackson was there when God wasn't. Matthew and April reconnect at a volunteer work at the clinic, and they get into a car accident. Arizona breaks the news that they were seeing each other again, and they understood each other's pain, which made them fall in love again. After the accident, April quit her job to work in a clinic providing healthcare access for Seattle's unhoused community. April and Matthew get married at the place where it was supposed to be Joe and Alex's wedding. Before I get into everything that happens later, how could you just easily get married again to the girl who left you at the altar, basically? Well, let's get back to the subject. Years later, Jackson approached April about moving to Boston because he wanted to run the Catherine Fox Foundation but didn't want to leave their daughter. She agrees and reveals that her and Matthew split up, explaining how at first they thought that it was God's plan to bring them back together after all their pain, but Matthew still resented her for leaving him at the altar. When his sister got sick, he wanted to take care of her and never came back. And she also explained how it was her way of dealing with her guilt of leaving Matthew at the altar. I'm gonna be fucking honest. Honestly, it's not to make April the bad guy, because that's not what I'm trying to do. But I would too still resent her for leaving me at the altar. Like, I don't think that's something that you just get over within a few years. Like, I couldn't be able to get back together with the person who left me at the altar, let alone marry to that person. Like, I think it's 100% valid that he still feels that kind of resentment. And the fact that she feels like she was, guilty for leaving him at the altar, and you know that she was trying to make herself feel better. Obviously it's not the best way to cope with that, I guess, trauma. She also says that it was a sort of a trauma marriage, which in a way it was, because they reconnected because of the pain that they have been suffered. You know, he lost his wife, she lost her son, and for that way they sort of reconnected. Explained that she didn't want to tell Jackson they split up because there were so many casualties in the war that she didn't think her marriage counted as one. And in Boston, April and Jackson got closer to each other again and rekindled their relationship, which had me shocked when I was rewatching the show, and I see these two kissing in season 18, I think, or 17, and I was just like, what just happened? Now let's talk about Jackson and April for a bit, the relationship itself. A lot of people like them, and I thought they were cute the first time that I watched the show. Then the more that I rewatched it, the less I liked it. But one of the reasons why I like it, and why I like April especially, is because I feel like she is one of the most human characters from Grey's Anatomy, or at least I can relate to her a lot, because I've also been that person who is very insecure, and that I have to constantly remind things to myself that let's say I'm beautiful, or I'm good at this and that. Like I used to be that girl who was very, very, very insecure. So in that way I relate to her, and I love to see the evolution of who she was in season 6 and then the person that she became in season 14. That is not the same insecure girl that carried a notebook at all times. Like, that was a girl who knows how good she is as a surgeon. That's a girl who, when she got, here's the thing, a lot of people, I know that I was supposed to talk about Jackson and April. I'll go back to the subject. I'm sorry, I get distracted. But April, in season 13, when Bailey fires Meredith because of the whole Eliza thing, you know, and she gives April the job of chief of general surgery, and everyone was mad at April for doing that and that she was backstabbing Meredith. I'm gonna be fucking honest, I never saw that as backstabbing. She got the opportunity, she took it. What's wrong with that? I hate the fact that they were giving her so much shit for the whole situation when she only just took a job. Meredith was fired, which she was not fired fairly, I will say. How do you say no to your boss when your boss is offering you a better position? When your boss is offering a better job, he's offering her chief of general surgery. Obviously Bailey's offering that to April because she fired Meredith, but how do you say no to that? You don't. And at the end of the day, April and Meredith were never really friends. Meredith, she never really made fun of April. She did a few times, but it wasn't as bad as Christina or Alex. She laughed at their jokes, so at the end of the day, she was not better. So yeah, I just thought that was stupid. Going back to April and Jackson, their relationship, I find that is kind of relatable, because in reality, why do so many relationships don't work out? Because they don't communicate properly, because they don't know how. Not only do people don't communicate, but it's also they don't know how to communicate to the other person. They don't know how to say things to the other person without hurting them, or talk about their feelings without blaming the other person. And I feel like April and Jackson represent that very well. I'm not exactly on board with dating your ex, but I hope that now that they are trying to date again and to see where everything goes, I hope that they fix the issues that they had in the beginning, because if they don't, then that relationship is gonna go to hell again. Because that's the thing, when you are dating your ex, if you're not gonna fix the issues that you had when you first break up, is those issues are still in your relationship, then don't go back to your ex, because it's gonna be the same. I think it's really interesting to look back at who April was, this insecure girl who had to remind herself of She deserves to be here at the hospital. She is a good surgeon. She will be an amazing surgeon one day. Someone that has to constantly remind herself, and someone that had to hide her relationship with God in fear of people mocking her, to now being an amazing, incredible surgeon who does not shy away from being a Christian, who proudly says that she is a Christian and that she loves God and has a very close relationship to God. And now she doesn't need a constant reminder of what she's capable of, or a constant reminder of she is good enough, because she knows that she's good enough. And I love that for her. Honestly, I love to see that. I love when people that once were very insecure about whatever it was, however small or big their problem was, and nowadays they have worked their way through that insecurity. That is not an insecurity anymore, and I just love to see it. And yeah, so I'm gonna end my video right here. I hope you guys enjoyed. I know what I said in the beginning, that this might be my last Grey's Anatomy video. If you have any suggestions, a character that you want me to talk about, or a certain something that happened in Grey's Anatomy that you want me to talk about, don't be shy. Tell me in the comments, and maybe I'll make a video about it. Maybe I'll just ignore you. I don't know. Who knows? So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you guys in my next video. Bye.